he froze, so he'll probably, if he gets disconnected, he'll have to rejoin and we'll bring him back in.
Okay. Welcome everybody to the December 1st meeting of the Los Gatos Town Council. I'll start with a roll call vote, Ms. Neese. Roll call vote. Roll call.
Thank you and good evening, Councilmember Rennie.
I vote yes.
Councilmember Sayak.
Here.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Jensen.
Here. Thank you all for being here and joining us this evening. We will start with council and manager matters. This is an opportunity for members of the council and the town manager to report out to members of the council and to the members of the community about things that they have done since our last meeting that they perform as either citizens of the community or members of the council that are issues that are of importance that we need to know. So I'm going to start with the Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the Board of the Sanitation District meeting. There's nothing to report out from that. I also attended the GPAC meeting. That one would be more of interest to the community in that we discussed the concept of missing middle, which conceptually could allow homes in single family neighborhoods to become multiple family. So that's something that I'm sure the community will be following as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sayak.
The only thing to report, and town manager may be reporting on this already, is the city's mayors and county meeting that occurs weekly where we discuss the change in restrictions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rennie.
Okay, thank you. Although my appointment for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District doesn't start until February, on 12/1, I started listening in and commenting as a member of the public on their board meeting. On 11/19, I chaired my last VTA Congestion Management Program committee meeting. And the big subject of discussion was the pulling forward of the BART funding from Measure B and delaying most of the other funding that was not already committed by the board for the next 10 years. Bike and PED is committed for the next 10 years. Transit operation funding is committed for 2 years. The scenario presented optimizing bonding for BART to keep the percentage of the cost of bonding from escalating. The scenario borrows $1 billion against 2000 Measure A revenue stream, and another, I think it's about $500 million against another stream of funds from the federal government. And since it's somewhere between 1 and 2 billion is already being borrowed, too much additional borrowing against the Measure B stream of revenue will cause the borrowing costs to hockey stick. So instead of it being 2%, it could come 3, 4, 5, 6, 7%. To borrow, depending on how much more, as staff explained. So with the optimized BART funding scenario, if we continue operations funding out 10 years, it leaves only half of the funds needed for the local streets and roads of which we and all other cities get money. I believe operations funding and local streets and roads are the most important things to make sure we keep funded. I asked staff as a chair to create options that would allow us to fully fund transit operations and local streets and roads. And what will the borrowing percent cost basically escalate to it if we keep these options. Thing of note was both the San Jose Council members on the committee effectively spoke against my request by saying funding for BART is more important, and even said directly San Jose can do with that with the reduced local streets and funding from Measure B, thus foreshadowing, I think, the fight to come on this issue still. On 11/19, I listened in on the county health call, and yesterday the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Finance and Administration Committee met, which I chaired. Nothing special to report from that. That's it.
Thank you, Councilman Rennie. Since our last meeting, we did have a West Valley Mayors and Managers meeting. We did discuss this VTA issue actually, and how the committee felt about it, as well as appointing our next VTA representative from the West Valley. Mr. Rennie, thank you very much for your service in that position. As you said, you're on backmud and you've got a very full plate with Silicon Valley Clean Energy and your role on the council next year. So Darcy Paul of Cupertino was appointed by the mayors and managers to become our next representative. The Measure B funding issue is quite at the forefront of the West Valley mayors and managers' minds, and council members. I know you've probably seen a draft letter prepared by Ms. Pavetti, which I hope you'll take a look at and then let us know whether we are good to sign that and send it to VTA. Also participated in GPAC as well. And with that, I'm going to go to Ms. Pavetti.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. I would like to announce that we have opened the recruitment for the new Finance Commission. So we have 5 resident member opportunities there. We also have 2 opportunities on our Planning Commission and 1 on our Complete Streets Commission due to the recent election. And we still have other vacancies that are available for community involvement. Applications are available on the clerk's website and they are due on January 8th at 4 p.m. Thank you. And please enjoy the holiday lights that are throughout the town, thanks to the efforts of town staff in celebration with the Chamber of Commerce. So you'll see more of the lighting exhibits popping up, as well as the lit tree in Plaza Park. Happy holidays.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pavetti. So we'll go on to the first. Mr. Schultz, we did have a closed session between our last meeting and this meeting. Do we need to report out on that?
Yes, we do, Your Mayor. On November 24th, council met in closed session to discuss the claim that was filed by Summerhill and get direction on settlement negotiations. No action was taken that requires reporting on the Brown Act. The proposed tentative settlement is on the agenda for council's review and discussion later on this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. We next move to our consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of items that generally the council has either already acted on or are considered to be non-controversial, such that they can be acted upon in a single motion. That said, if any member of the council wants to pull an item from the consent, or any member of the public wants to pull an item from consent, can do so now. I'll ask the council first. Does anyone want to pull an item from our consent calendar, items 1 through 10? Okay, seeing no one. If you are participating with us tonight and you would like to pull an item from consent, you can use your Zoom function to raise your hand to let me know that you want to do that, or you can call in. I think it's on *9. And I always give it a couple of seconds to make sure you get your technology working, and I don't see anyone. So I'm going to look to the council for a motion on the consent calendar. Councilwoman Sayak.
I move items 1 through 10 on consent calendar for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by the Vice Mayor. I'm going to, as we do on all of our Zoom meetings, we take roll call votes on each item. So Vice Mayor Spector.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayak.
Yes.
Councilman Rennie.
Yes.
Mayor votes yes, it passes unanimously. We again then move to the first item, verbal communications. This is a time for anyone who would like to speak to the council about something that's not on the agenda. And if something's not on the agenda, it means it hasn't been publicly noticed. So there won't be a discussion, a report, or a question and answer period. You simply share your ideas and thoughts with the council at this time, and you have 3 minutes to do that. Does anybody want to talk to us about something that's not on the agenda? Okay, I do not see anyone. So I'm going to move past verbal communications to our listed items. And the first item is something that I'm very excited about. And I I'm very pleased that the members of the Ad Hoc Fire Committee can join us this evening to discuss this item. And I want to just personally thank them before we move on to the report, and that is Vice Mayor Spector, Citizen Rob Stump, Citizen Brad Gordon, Assistant Fire Chief Brian Glass, with the able assistance of Arn Andrews and Laura Pavetti. And I actually also served on the committee, but this is our opportunity to report back on the Ad Hoc Fire Committee's progress and our report. So, Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Actually, this evening, Rob Stump, who was the chair of the committee, will be providing the report out. But as you mentioned, Mayor, you have committee members here, including myself and Public Works Director Matt Morley, to be available for any questions after Mr. Stump's presentation. I'm going to go ahead and move to the share screen mode so all the participants know that we're going to be giving a presentation.
Thank you, Arn. Hey, first I want to acknowledge and thank the town council for authorizing in October the establishment of an ad hoc wildfire committee. The purpose to study wildfire mitigation with the goal of improving the town's wildfire resiliency. Why? I believe the town is really serious about the threat of wildfire to this hillside community. Of course, all around us in California, we see examples of devastating wildfires with economic losses in the billions of dollars. And we do not want to become one of those examples. But while we can't prevent every wildfire threat, this committee was formed to examine best practices of similar wildfire impacted communities, lessons learned from recent fires, and other relevant areas of wildfire science. One of the communities that I want to put out there for you that has developed and implemented best practices to prepare and prevent wildfires, Montecito, located in Santa Barbara County, under the leadership of the Montecito Fire District. Chief Glass connected us with them for a great conversation back in November. They've experienced 4 major wildfires over the past 30 years. They have taken bold and decisive action to mitigate the impacts of wildfire in their community. One telling example of this was the Thomas Fire, which was one of the largest fires in California history in December 2017. It destroyed over 1,000 homes. Only 7 homes were lost in Montecito. So their efforts have been tremendous. I also wanted to take a moment, and I know the mayor did this as well, but to recognize and thank the committee members appointed by the town of Los Gatos and thank the town. Over our 4 meetings together, we explored actions that needed to be taken. We developed the committee report that's being presented this evening. And I have to tell you, all members demonstrated a commitment to make a difference for our community. So I just want to personally thank all of you. Arn, I'm going to head to the next slide on committee goals. The areas that we explored are not new nor groundbreaking. In fact, they are common sense. For each of these areas, emergency communication, emergency evacuation, roadside fuel reduction, open space and residential land management, and emergency partnerships, we developed goals that you see here on this slide, and when Arn flips it to the next slide. These items, as you see them, are listed in an order of priority. While all of these items are important, really the top priority items are focused on immediate public safety, communication, and evacuation. We have got to get these things right. Items that follow: roadside fuel reduction, open space and residential land management, which includes obviously defensible space and emergency partnerships, are also very critical to our efforts. And by the way, I just want to give a shout out to Matt Morley again under the category of roadside fuel reduction. Awesome work is underway right now. I want to invite you to drive up Foster Road to see work in progress. It will be startling to see the change and the difference. So Arn, if you want to flip down to either the next slide related to the last 2 goals, and I'm going to move on to the slide on action items. Each of our goals has action items that need to be addressed. A total of 35 action items were identified, and we divided them into 2 categories. Priority 1, those are the items that we believe need to be addressed within 2 years. And priority 2, those items that need to be addressed within 3 to 5 years. I wanted to give some samples of the priority 1 action items, even though they're in the report. So under the heading of communication, we need to explore additional non-cell, non-internet reliant emergency communication systems. As an example, a siren system to increase our community communication. Under the heading of evacuation, we have got to move forward and continue the work on assessing and addressing evacuation feeder routes leading out of the WUI throughout Los Gatos. This is critical to public safety. Under the heading of roadside fuel reduction, continue to build on the plan that's been put in place this year and ensure that all 31 miles of highest roadway concern are addressed and that we achieve a 6-year management cycle, 5 miles per year. How important is fuel reduction along the roadside? In Montecito, they told us, shared with us, 70% of the fires in their area are started within 50 feet of a roadway. Roadside fuel reduction, critical. Open space and residential land management. We want to partner on a pilot for a wildland fire specialist program to develop relationships with homeowners in the very high fire hazard zone and drive compliance through education and inspection. This is the single most impactful thing we can do to mitigate the threat of wildfire in our community. It's about leadership. In Montecito, a wildland fire specialist was hired to oversee all things wildfire with defensible space a top priority. The specialist, boots on the ground, developed strong community relationships that have resulted in 95% defensible space compliance with little need for enforcement, 95% compliance. And under the leadership of that specialist, Montecito has built a community culture around wildfire preparation and prevention. Last but not least, emergency partnerships. We have got to work with neighboring cities of Montecito and Saratoga, at least as a starting point, to coordinate mitigation efforts and jointly advocate for the continuation and increased vegetation management among town partners. And we can't do this alone. As we all know, wildfire knows no boundary. We need to step up and demonstrate leadership with and for our connected communities. Last but not least on this slide, 29 metrics were identified for possible application. And as the old saying goes, if you don't measure it, you don't manage it. We need a set of metrics that can be tracked and regularly reported to the council. It drives accountability. And then Arn, I'm going to call this one the final slide, which says conclusion. And as we wrap up this formal presentation, what does this report do for us? This report establishes a roadmap with concrete actions that will reduce the risk of wildfire in Los Gatos. The recommended actions need to be considered the top public safety priority as the council considers strategic priorities, capital improvements, and planning in general. Our collective actions that we take on here will save lives and mitigate the potential for serious economic impact to the residents of Los Gatos. Thank you again for the opportunity to serve.
Mr. Stump, thank you so much for your leadership and your passion on this issue. We really appreciate it, and it comes through every time you speak about it. I'm going to change our order a little bit before I ask the council to make motions or take comments, and see if any other member of the ad hoc fire committee wishes to speak. You don't have to, but if you want to, you certainly can. And also see if any member of the public wants to speak on this issue. Chief Glass, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the members of the ad hoc committee and under the leadership of Chair Stump, the mayor, the vice mayor, town staff. Everyone has really been motivated and passionate about fire safety within the town of Los Gatos. I think the leadership that has been exhibited by this committee will serve the town very well. We look forward to being in that partnership with the town as we move forward to a wildland urban interface and help you achieve these goals and metrics within the wildland urban interface. So just wanted an opportunity to say thank you. It's been a pleasure to work alongside this group. Look forward to more in the future.
Chief Glass, thank you so much for your participation and guidance, which was invaluable to us. Any other member of the committee wish to speak, or any member of the public? I do see one hand from a member of the public, Bill Ellers. And when I call on you, just for general information, simply unmute yourself and begin talking. We'll let you know if we cannot hear you.
So my name is Bill Ellers. I'm a member of the Commission for Complete Streets and Transportation. I'd like to ask one question for wildfire planning. Are we going to think about hardening structures and talk about building codes and making houses harder rather than just defensible space? That's all I had to say on this topic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure we'll get there. That's not part of this report, but the town council did pass an ordinance earlier in the year regarding building structures and wildfires. So it could well be that we have addressed some of those things already, but I'm gonna just let you write into the town and figure that out. Any other comments or questions from the public? Okay, then I'm gonna call on the council for any comments that they may have. What we're being asked to do here is accept the report. So does anyone want to make any comments? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. Of course, I'd like to thank the committee for their work. And I'm really impressed with how much they pulled together very quickly. So thank you for doing it quickly. It is kind of a high level report, but that's a good place to start with, what are our goals and what are putting our priorities. And I completely agree with the order in which you put your goals. I'm looking forward to learning more about the details. I would be tempted to ask questions now, but I know we're not at that stage. I'm a detail guy. I know emergency, for example, emergency communication is particularly interesting because something like sirens can be a challenge. Of course, if cell's down, you need to evacuate people, but if the fire is coming down Foster Road, you need to get those people out first. And if you set off a siren and people off of Cypress and everywhere else all of a sudden block the roadways, you can't get people off of Foster. So I know it's going to be kind of an interesting solution to come up with. How do you make sure you get the right people out first, kind of thing? And I don't want to go into details. I know we're not at that, but that's what I'm looking forward to. I'm kind of excited to see how we solve all these kinds of problems. And so if you like, I'll go ahead and make a motion to accept the report. I'm very excited on the progress.
Certainly. You may go ahead. Oh, wait, I've got two hands up though. Councilwoman Sayak and then Vice Mayor.
Okay, I'll go ahead and second the report and echo the thanks and the gratitude that has already been shared. I did, as Councilmember Rennie said, there are many questions that remain that I think we'd like to get into, but I look forward to the conversation next year as we get through the priorities. What I'd love to better understand, and I think it will be coming, is how we can incorporate this into next year's work plan and budget process so that we can make sure that we continuously work through this document so it's not just a document that you've prepared that sits on a shelf. But again, thank you very much. And I hope our residents feel a little bit better knowing that there are minds that have been put that can help address some of the issues that we've been all contemplating.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I just want to thank everybody who was on this committee. It is the most effective and best committee on which I have ever served. So kudos to all of you. We did a lot of work really fast and really well. So we'll be supporting the motion, but then I had a question. And that is, I see from the staff report that this is coming back in 1 year. And I was thinking maybe it would be better if it came back before 1 year. And listening to Ms. Sayak and Mr. Rennie, I'm thinking, even more so. So I will look to the other committee members and to staff to see if possibly we can go back over this in less than 1 year. But again, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Mr. Rennie, you made the motion. Are you interested in having this come back sooner, or do you want to wait for the new council and the priority setting session to figure that out?
I was anxious to have it come back sooner, but I know, we want to wait till some work is done. A year does seem like a long time to get another report on this, especially since we're also interested. Maybe that should be a question. Through the chair, I see Mr. Andrews raising his hand. Maybe he can shed some light on if a year is necessary or not.
Mr. Andrews?
Thank you. So similar to the comments the Vice Mayor and others made, it was the intent of this committee that this document just does not remain on a shelf somewhere. And so at a minimum, we wanted the recommendation to direct staff to report back in a year. It's the intent of the town manager to include this report as the resource materials for strategic priorities. In addition, any of the newly elected council members who would like to speak to the item, we'd be more than happy to meet with them also to get everyone up to speed. In addition, Mr. Stump, being the resident that he is and as deeply concerned as he is, has offered to remain on staff. And so we're going to start working through some of the more, to Mr. Rennie's point, okay, how do we start putting some of these items into action? And so we're going to start formulating a plan for that. But at a minimum, the council members will see this as part of a strategic priorities discussion, the same way they would discuss PCI in the town and the same way they would discuss unfunded liabilities. This will be one more item that they'll be able to contemplate as they think about how they want to expend budgetary dollars.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. So Mr. Rennie?
So based on that, it sounds like we should just leave the report as is and wait for the next council to work through the priority session then.
Okay, so your motion is remaining the same?
Yes.
Okay, and the seconder, is that okay with you? And you're muted, but I think you said yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion on this item before I call the question? All right, Vice Mayor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, so it passes unanimously. So once again, committee, thank you so much for all your hard work. And thank you for attending and joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. And you're free to go. The next item on our agenda is a discussion of the Highway 17 bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing. And for that, we are going to get a report from Ying Smith. So Ms. Smith.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. Ying Smith, Transportation and Mobility Manager. And I'd like to first ask Mr. Andrews to show the PowerPoint presentation, please. So today I have the honor to represent the project team to share a brief presentation with you on the Highway 17 bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing project. This is one of the Connect Los Gatos projects and has generated a high level of interest in the community. Next slide, please. So here's the outline of what we're going to cover. I will start with a refresher on some of the project background information we covered at the September 1st meeting. Then explain the project phases and the schedule. I will also introduce the community engagement plan before getting to the staff recommendations. Next slide, please. At the September 1st meeting, the Town Council approved several staff recommendations, which established a major milestone for this project. The staff recommendations for you under consideration this evening build on the actions you took at the September 1st meeting. They're shown on this slide just to bring everyone onto the same page. So the next slide shows just a diagram showing the preferred project alignment. So I just want to explain a few things to unpack this preferred alignment. There are three key components. The project will be a separate bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing, and the location is immediately south of Blossom Hill Road, the Blossom Hill Road Bridge. And the width is defined as between 16 and 20 feet. So the next slide shows the project cost and funding. It's the same table you saw at the September 1st meeting we have received many questions and comments on cost and funding. So I think we're going to spend just a couple minutes on it. So the total project cost, including the 3 phases, feasibility study, final design, and construction, the estimate is about $28.9 million. And here, the table below shows the project by phase. 2 of the recommendations under your consideration address the funding question. So the next phase is final design. The cost is roughly $3.7 million. And the sources of this phase will come from Measure B, which is about $2.75 million, and then the town's own funds, which is at $946,200. The construction by itself is roughly $25 million, and we don't have that phase is unfunded. Of course, in the project development process, the staff will continue to look for funding, and the big part of this $25 million will likely come from outside grant programs, including the ATP, the state's ATP Active Transportation Program, as well as the Measure B, which is the countywide sales tax measure. The next slide shows the project phase. Should the council approve the staff recommendations this evening, we'll issue a request for proposal for engineering design soon after today. The design phase will take about 3 years, and it's pretty lengthy and pretty involved process, and it's always a very expensive process as well. There will be several milestones, and this diagram shows where those major milestones will be and when the council is expected to make those key decisions. The next slide, please. And I want to touch on community engagement. Community engagement, it is really crucial for this project. Today, the project team has focused a lot on many outreach efforts. This slide just gives you the highlight of the different tools we use. You can see that we're using both the more old-fashioned paper format, as well as relying on the project website and social media to get the word out. Building on, next slide, please. Building on the work we did during the feasibility study phase, and then also learning from it, staff is presenting a project-specific community engagement plan for your consideration. The goal is to maximize opportunities for all interested parties to provide meaningful feedback and also to allow the information to flow. This plan establishes a framework to help guide the process, and it also provides a very comprehensive toolbox to support the project team in deploying the right tool for the right situation. I do want to highlight the 3 elements in this engagement plan. The first one is stakeholders. We have identified a very broad group of stakeholders. They represent many different users and different members of the community, including students, seniors, commuters, bicyclists and pedestrians, people who live close by, as well as people who may travel a bit ways to come here for the regional attractions, including the Sona Park. We also need to work with different resources and regulatory agencies, including Caltrans and utility companies. By identifying the stakeholders at the beginning, it helps us to ensure the process is comprehensive and we're not leaving anyone behind, and also helps us to design a project that serves everyone, not just the experienced cyclists, but really people, little kids or families who want to try out biking as well as walking to different destinations. The second component is the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. This commission has been a great partner in the project process. It communicates with the council as well as the community. They provide feedback to staff. The commissioners have been very, very involved from day one. Many of them have volunteered to collect counts and take observation notes to help support the project. The third piece is about information sharing and transparency. We understand that people use many tools to communicate. They get information in many ways. we have been very responsive and learning as we go, right? Learning new ways to be more effective in our communication. We have found that the project webpage is very good as a place for information sharing and store the project updates as well as historic documents. We intend to continue to use it and to use it as a one centralized place for information. So that goes to the staff recommendations. Next slide, please. So there are 5 recommendations for consideration. The first one is the Measure B agreement with VTA for the town to accept the grant. Second one is about budget adjustments that's necessary. It supports action 1. The last 3 recommendations helps us move the project forward by doing the work to issue the request for proposal and hire a consultant to finish the engineering design and environmental analysis. The goal is to develop projects that align with the project's purpose and need that you approved early this year back in March. So that will allow us to enter into this next phase and work with our community to make this successful project. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Smith. I'm going to look to the council then for questions, and if you could remove the screen share, that would be helpful so I can see if people have got their hands raised on the council. Any questions from council preliminarily, knowing that we'll come back after public comment? All right, seeing none. If you would like to speak on this item, please raise your electronic hand by going to your controls on your Zoom. And as I see your name come up, I'll call your name. When I do call your name, please unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes then to speak. Sheldon Gilbert.
Hi, my name is Sheldon Gilbert. I'm a resident of Los Gatos, moved here in 2007, and I live on the east side of town near Kennedy Road. I'm very excited about this project and just wanted to express my support. I've always seen Los Gatos as a biking, walking, outdoor recreation community, but it's kind of split in half by the highway. When I moved here in 2007, my kids were young. I remember going on our first bike ride and taking them on a ride along with my daughter behind me on my bike when they were 7 and 9. And as we passed over this bridge, a truck came past us, and it was terrifying to me and my daughter, and was never able to bring her on the ride along on that road again. In 2018, I joined the BPAC and became chair of the BPAC and was aware of this project, and I'm very excited to see it moving forward as it is. As a part of being on the BPAC, I volunteered with Ying to do some traffic studies and pedestrian counts, and one of those was in front of the schools there on Blossom Hill Road, right before the bridge. Maria Ristow and Ying and I sat there one afternoon as the school let out, and if you haven't done it, I strongly encourage you to do that. You have never seen a bigger crowd, throng, swarm of kids as they come out of school and all go across the bridge, and it's terrifying. I mean, there are hundreds of kids on every scooter and bicycle and God knows what, all running, very difficult to manage. Definitely trying to stay, being directed to stay on the sidewalk and off the roads, but as you can imagine, kids in middle school and even from Van Meter and Blossom Hill, it's just crazy, and I couldn't believe that happened every day, and we haven't had an accident there yet. Maybe we haven't, I'm not aware of it, but it's very dangerous, and so many kids are encouraged. And I've always encouraged my kids to bike to school, but if I was on the west side and needed my kids to go on the east side after school every day, it would just scare me. In fact, I never let my kids cross on Highway 9, of course. It's just way too dangerous for the kids, and Blossom Hill Road also, if you've ever tried it. I'm a big road biker, so I cross that bridge all the time. And if you cross at the wrong time when a truck is crossing, it's just incredibly dangerous. I think it's also amazing that we're able to do this for such, with the goal of getting a lot of money from outside the community. So to create such value for our community, make it more accessible to people who want to commute or go to Vasona Park or something, and for us to be able to get this kind of an asset added to our community. And bring funding from outside grants and so forth to pay for most of it. I think it's a great job. I want to commend the staff for putting this plan together, and I hope the council supports it. I think it'd be a great thing for Los Gatos.
Mr. Gilbert, thank you very much. Let's see if there's any questions for you. I don't see any, so I'll call the next person, who is Jeff Thompson. And once you're done speaking, then just mute yourself again and take your hand down, please. Thank you. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Thompson. You are still muted.
And Mayor, I'm unable to unmute him, so he, I believe, probably has an older version.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can hear you now.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
the mute button didn't show up until now. Okay, my name is Jeff Thompson, and I'm speaking tonight as a resident of Los Gatos, but I should note that I'm also serving as the Vice Chair of the Complete Streets and Transportation Advisory Commission. So I'd like to also speak in favor of building the separate pedestrian and bike bridge over 17 near Blossom Hill Road. I participated, like Mr. Gilbert did, I participated in a bike and pedestrian count last March on Blossom Hill during the morning hours as kids went to school. And this was the week before the shelter in order last March. So school was still in full attendance. And there were many, many kids. Over a half-hour period, lots of kids traveling on the sidewalk and riding bikes and overflowing onto the shoulder of the street over the bridge with a good deal of car traffic flowing by. The existing bridge is really not safe for the volume of kids walking and biking with all the car traffic. And for this reason alone, we should build the bridge. But additionally, like Sheldon, I ride a bike over this bridge frequently, probably about once a week. And most cars pass by me closer than the required 3 feet of space because the shoulder over the existing bridge is just too narrow. There just isn't room for a car and a bike to pass with the 3 feet of clearance. So we really need the bridge to allow cyclists to safely travel over 17. And I vote very much and would like to put forth the thoughts that we should build this. It's a great project, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Are there any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, I'm going to go to the next person, and I'm not going to say your name because I will not get it correct. It's Ray, and your last name starts with a B. I'd love to hear how to pronounce it correctly.
Ray Brisges, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank Madam Mayor and council members. Thank you for the opportunity to hear me on this issue. I live in the Zona Benefit Zone, Ohlone Court, and would be adjacent to the proposed bike pedestrian lane. From our vantage point, I specifically can see changes or potential changes to traffic noise levels, tree lines, and the Zona Benefit Zone integrity. I personally see these as adverse environmental impacts that will affect my property as a result of the current proposal, the staff's preferred alternative. I believe the town has not adequately addressed these issues to date, but staff's proposal appears to be moving toward an attempt to lock in the current proposal. This vote tonight might effectively permanently close the door to mitigation of adverse effects onto my property and local area. I believe this is contrary to state environmental laws, and you have a duty to address environmental impacts with specifics rather than generic statements. Instead of saying things will be substantially the same, that tree removal will be according to town plans, and having no reference to the benefit zone, I'd like to see some quantification to these issues. I see no alternatives or mitigation measures to avoid even the traffic issue, which I have brought up on a number of occasions, the noise level, which seems to be increasing over time. And I do not want to be locked into such a project without having feasible alternatives or mitigation measures considered in the plan. I urge you not to accept this vote tonight as, and please address these concerns prior to funding the majority of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, I don't see any, so I'm going to move to the next person, Michael Strauss.
Hello, Madam Mayor and Town Council members. I am Michael Strauss. My wife Kathy and I moved here to Los Gatos with our 2 kids about 7 years ago. We've owned our current home on Sarah Court for 5 years. We support the project and agree that something needs to be done to make the Blossom Hill Road crossing over 17 safer and more comfortable for pedestrians and bicyclists. However, one detail that will be flushed out during the design process this council is likely to fund tonight is of concern to my family and to our neighbors on Sarah Court. Page 49 from the Highway 17 Bicycle and Pedestrian Overcrossing Feasibility Study by BKF, dated November 2020, discusses under the headline, Approach to the East of Highway 17, that additional studies will be needed to determine if there is sufficient public right-of-way east of Highway 17 to accommodate the proposed improvements without any impacts to the existing decorative wall that is shown in a photo. This retaining wall separates Blossom Hill from Sarah Court. The town maintains the wall while the Sarah Court community maintains the upper retaining wall behind it. It says that replacing these walls would increase project costs. However, in order to avoid impacting them, the project would need to would be required to realign Blossom Hill Road near the Roberts Road East extension. We definitely don't want the town to have to replace our retaining wall, which is inherently risky and exposes the town to liability, or have the town take property from our private street, which would pull Blossom Hill closer to our homes, remove our buffer from the road, and take down our lush landscaping growing on and around the decorative fence. Just one concern that we know will be addressed as part of the design process, but we wanted to note our issue or potential issue depending on how the design goes. Also wanted to mention that I applaud the stated emphasis on community outreach in all the materials and the website, but we also just wanted to note that we're one of the 2 streets potentially most impacted, and to date we've received 1 postcard. So let's keep in mind that our community definitely wants to participate in the design process. Thank you, council members, for your consideration and for your service to the community. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Let's see if there's any questions for you. I don't see any. The next person I have is Bill Ellers.
Hello, my name is Bill Ellers. I spoke earlier. I'm speak as a member of the public. I'm also on the commission, the Complete Streets Transportation Commission. I fully support this bridge. The existing bridge is dangerous for cycling and for walking. It's used by hundreds. It will be used by thousands of kids over its lifetime. And it seems to be very much needed safety improvement. Another part of the thing is Los Gas is cut in half by 17. Well, let's right that wrong and connect our town halves together to have a better community for all. That's, I echo the words of Ms. Thompson and Sheldon to please approve this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, the next speaker is Bob Buxton. Mr. Buxton, if you want to unmute yourself. You may speak.
How's that?
There you go. Hello.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Madam Vice Mayor, Council, staff. Speaking as a resident and also as the chair of the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. Our commission and I as a resident fully support this project. We have a safety issue here. None of us want there to be an accident involving a child, an adult citizen, a driver of a car. How terrible that would be. This is a few dollars to support making our community much safer with this bridge. Totally support it and look forward to the council supporting this project and moving it forward. Thank you very much for your service and thanks for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Any questions? Yeah, I don't see any. And the next person I have the hand up is Jacob Schroeder.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm a resident of the Ohlone Court neighborhood and a parent of 3 kids who attend Van Meter Elementary School. I'm on the west side of Highway 17 and cross daily with a 5, 6, and a 7-year-old, and I have for 3 years. My family was 16 of those counts taken by town staff on any given day. I saw you guys and you counted me and my family. At the September 1 town council meeting, I, along with many from my neighborhood, spoke and expressed our concerns about the proposed southbound alignment, which is the only design on the table now. Then the town told staff to consult with our neighborhood, and for that I thank you. And staff did, and for that I thank them. But the refrain we heard from staff at that October meeting was A, staff agreed with our concerns, but B, staff's hands were tied by the town's decision on September 1 to proceed with the chosen design. And what good is our input if staff feels like it cannot consider alternative designs? I hope none of you find yourself in the position we have found ourselves in, which is a decision was made to build a bridge next to your house and neighborhood, and that the town only reaches out to your neighborhood after the decision had been made and only to see if you want the bridge to be green or maroon, concrete or steel, and what style of lights to place on the bridge. I understand there's a lot of support from people who won't see this bridge every day. Trust me, we support a solution too. So does my 5-year-old. We just support one that's well thought out. Take it from those of us who live in this neighborhood with vested property interests. We're concerned that staff has not considered the impact on the environment that the current design will impose. These impacts are many and include increased noise pollution, increased visual blight, the need to cut down historic California oaks, disruptions of the hummingbirds that live in those trees, further damage to the eroding hillside on the side of Blossom Hill, areas that those of us in this neighborhood have paid the town through special assessments to maintain, increased vehicular traffic to the Ohlone Court neighborhood when our neighborhood becomes the new pickup drop-off spot for the schools, a decrease in safety at West Roberts Road, and the list goes on. And before the town commits more funding to the southbound alignment, which is what staff seeks now, I'd only ask that town ask the staff to conduct an environmental impact study and consider design alternatives to eliminate these impacts or propose ways to mitigate them before significant funds are committed to this design and we're locked in. And to be clear, most, if not all of us in this neighborhood are in favor of improving Blossom Hill crossing over 17. Now, on that point, I agree with all of the comments that something should be done. Trust me, it's dangerous. But none of those comments support come from people who live next to where this will be. So of course they don't care about what happens to our property. The answer is not simply to rush into slapping a concrete Band-Aid over the problem simply because money for that is readily available. Rather, I submit that any improvement must be carefully considered and weighed against competing alternatives to find the one that not only accomplishes the goals of the town, but also, to borrow a concept from Boy Scouts, leaves the area in a better state than the one in which we found it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Schroeder? I don't see any, so I have a next person I see is John Smart.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking my comments. So I am also a long-time resident of Ohlone Court. I would like to focus my discussion on the timing of CEQA environmental review, as that is a particular concern to the involved neighborhoods. More particularly, I'd like to focus on the notion of project approval under CEQA, as that is a bright line trigger for when CEQA environmental review is actually due for this project. So this project is a public project where the project sponsor and reviewing agency are one and the same. So that stands in contrast, for example, to the Summerhill Homes North 40 project, which is a private project with checks and balances provided by the fact that there are two counterparties. Of course, when you have the situation where someone gets to grade their own homework, there is an opportunity for abuse. And that in fact has been the case with public agencies reviewing their own projects, where there is an obvious incentive to shortcut CEQA compliance. As a result of that, there is now a body of case law and CEQA guidelines specifically addressing this issue. And in fact, that was the subject of a letter that I sent to the town council. So in the case of a private project, the developer submits an application that is, quote unquote, approved at some point by the reviewing agency, with the public having some degree of confidence that the project is subject to proper checks and balances. In the case of a public project, however, approval is more fact-driven based on the surrounding circumstances. So recognizing this, the CEQA guidelines define approval as the decision committing an agency to a definite course of action on the project. So the take-home message here is that you will not be able to finely tune your project approval under CEQA to the same extent that you're accustomed to doing with a private project. Instead, your approval here will be reconstructed in hindsight based on the surrounding circumstances that you allow to occur. So for example, should staff proceed based on your approval tonight to spend substantial sums of money pursuing the final design of staff's preferred alternative, then tonight's action will undoubtedly be confirmed to be a project approval under CEQA. So given how easy it is to make a decision that commits a project to a definite course of action, thereby meeting the guideline definitions of approval, I urge the town council to exercise appropriate caution and diligence here to avoid inadvertently granting approval. At the point that you do wish to grant approval, be advised that CEQA review is required beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Any questions? And we did receive your letter. Thank you. Any questions? I don't see any. And I also don't see any other hands up. So I'm going to give it a couple seconds. Oh, here we go. Jillian Verga.
Hi, I'm Jillian Verga. I've been a resident of Los Gatos for about 22 years. I am speaking for myself. I am also on the Complete Streets and Transportation Commission. So I'm very familiar with this project. I just wanted to add my support. I live downtown now, but I used to live in East Los Gatos, and even something as simple as going across to Vasona Park to take my kids to the park was challenging because of this particular bridge overcrossing. And I want to say that this is, I believe, much more than just for kids going to school. It certainly is that, but it's also connecting adults and connecting our town. And then I think it's also part of a bigger picture. At one point, I was actually biking from Los Gatos to work in San Jose. And I know that we are a car-centric society, but I believe that the Bay Area is trying to put in more bike infrastructure so that it is easier to actually travel through active transportation. And I think it's important for Los Gatos to be a part of that and to connect our whole town with that. And we're very fortunate to have the Los Gatos Creek Trail as kind of a spine going through the middle of our town, and making sure that East Los Gatos has access to that in a safe way, I think is very important. Helping people to use our biking infrastructure means fewer cars. It doesn't mean everyone can get out of their cars, but for those people who never bike and who travel everywhere in cars, this is still a benefit for them because there will be other people who are no longer in cars causing traffic for them. I think this helps reduce traffic and noise. So I think for those people concerned about noise and congestion, this will be a benefit to them. And I believe also it will help property values for people who have the opportunity to use that and can see a way to send their kids to school over this bridge safely without having to escort them all the time. Finally, I would say that I think it is important that we move forward with the next step. This is not a project that you could do at just any time. And the fact that funds are available is something that is a concern, because if we pass this up, we may not have the opportunity to do it in the future. These funds are earmarked for bike and pedestrian projects. And if they are not used for that, they may not be available in the future, and we may miss this opportunity. So I recommend that we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Virgo. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, seeing none, a couple more hands have popped up. Amit Shetty.
Hi, I'm Amit Shetty. I've been a resident in Los Gatos since 2011, and I do cross this bridge on a regular basis as I try to get some exercise going, if you will. And it's always been worry about how narrow the bridge is and how much traffic goes through it. So I definitely am in support of the construction of the bridge to help with pedestrians and bicycles. Of course, it would be great if we could have done this on Highway 9 instead. I feel like that's probably the more dangerous point, but I do understand that that's a lot more complicated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Shetty? Don't see any. Brian Royston.
Hello, everybody. My name's Brian Royston, and I've lived in Los Gatos since the early 1990s. We've been homeowners here since 1996, and I've been an avid mountain biker in the area for almost 30 years. This calendar year, I will climb over 400,000 vertical feet. Almost every one of those feet is here in the Los Gatos Mountains. So I say that to say I'm pretty comfortable on a bicycle. And while I'm very comfortable descending steep, rocky fire roads in the local open space preserves, I'm very uncomfortable riding in the bike lane on Blossom Hill, crossing over Highway 17. The steep curb can risk a pedal strike that could throw you into traffic. The distracted drivers multitasking as they cross the bridge could easily make a tragic mistake. Not to mention any of this happening while kids are crossing the bridge because of the schools close by. Because of this, I wasn't comfortable with my daughter riding her bike over this bridge to Van Meter. I applaud any infrastructure effort to keep bikes and pedestrians safe from vehicles, as it makes our town a more pleasant and safer place. As I understand, the overwhelming majority of the funds to build this bridge are coming from a grant from outside the community. I understand this grant is specifically focused on providing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements like this, and could not be used for some other non-pedestrian street or intersection improvements in our town. So if we don't take advantage of this grant money, it would most likely go to another community that would obviously have a greater focus on bike and pedestrian safety. I don't think any community should value bikes and pedestrians more than Los Gatos. So I think we should do this. And I totally understand the people on Ohlone Court and your concerns, but I live on College Avenue, and which is probably the most heavily trafficked street by bikes and pedestrians as they go to Jones Road. And I absolutely love it. I love the sense of community, the people out and about. And I think that it would be a great improvement in your area, in your property, to be able to jump on a bike and cruise right across 17 to go to one of 3 great coffee shops or something like that, and just be safe away from traffic. So believe me, this will be an improvement to your community. Thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Royston. Any other questions, or I'm sorry, any other speakers? Okay, I am not seeing anyone, so I'm going to close the public hearing. And then I'm going to look to the council for first questions, because I imagine there's a number of questions. Councilman Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. So the most obvious question is the environmental study. You know, on our project timeline, it has us, it says environmental document finished by 2023. Is this a full EIR, just a mitigated neg deck, something in between? Did we already do an EIR with our bike and ped plan? I can't recall. Is the document going to include studies of noise and traffic, and will it have alternatives like you might see in an EIR?
Yes, thank you for the question. So we will go through the CEQA process and as well as NEPA process just to position the project to receive federal funding. Based on the feasibility study, we do have an environmental sub-consultant on the team. Our analysis, this is not likely going to be a full EIR. We don't want at this point to decide what level, but based on the information so far, it will be either a cortical exempt or a mitigated neg deck. And we will have to do an initial study to determine the level, appropriate level of environmental analysis. Yes, all the details on noise, impact on trees, right way, transportation, and other elements will be studied. And people ask for the quantification of those impacts. That will be carried out in the environmental process during final design.
And a follow-up question. So our approval tonight is to approve money so that you can start doing the design, and from that, be able to do the environmental analysis and pay for the environmental analysis. But the final design or even alternatives is not being approved tonight, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Other questions? I actually have a follow-up kind of to Mr. Rennie's question. Mr. Smart was talking about a CEQA approval process, if you will, based on CEQA guidelines. And I don't know who's appropriate to answer this, but it's my understanding that we wouldn't be doing a CEQA review or an environmental review until we had a final design. Am I correct about that? And is Mr. Smart correct about his analysis of the guidelines? Kind of a two-part question, whoever is appropriate to answer that.
I'm going to start, probably need some support from our town attorney on this one. Your actions tonight, they are not discretionary actions. So your actions tonight, they are not defined as projects. We will, when the project in this case will be defined as the construction of this particular project. So you will have to clear all the environmental analysis work when the council gets to the point to make that discretionary action, which is in this case, the construction of the project itself.
Okay, that actually answers my question. And then I just, for whoever is appropriate, probably you, Ms. Smith, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what the council is being asked to consider tonight. And so what I'm reading it, and this is my shorthand, one is a contract between the town and BTA regarding grant monies. The second is the acceptance of the grant monies with a town matching payment. The third is a request for proposals for design of a bridge. And the fourth is the community engagement plan. Is that correct? So we're not approving any particular bridge. I guess my point, we're not approving a particular crossing. We're not approving a particular design. We're potentially entering a contract, getting grant money, matching the grant money, asking for designs, and selecting a community engagement plan. Is that what we're being asked to do tonight?
Yes.
Pretty much? Okay. Thank you. Vice Mayor, I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. I need to understand this better. I think that addressing what all the speakers were saying, I don't think there's any doubt that we need to get our pedestrians and our bicyclists east-west in Los Gatos over 17. With regard to the staff report tonight, though, it's, if I understand it correctly, the money is to complete the final design. Is that yes or no?
Yes.
So after we spend the, let's say, $3 million, we will have a final design, and then is the CEQA analysis conducted?
Yeah, final design is a term that would kind of cover many elements. Environmental clearance, the CEQA clearance is part of the final design. So at the end, you will have to take an action on the CEQA clearance as well as to approve the design.
All right, so assuming that staff has $3 million and assuming that they move forward in the next year or two to a final design, and then there is a CEQA analysis. If the CEQA analysis doesn't approve the design or requires a modification of the design, then that money would have to come from what?
So if I could step in. So CEQA doesn't approve a design or modify a design. CEQA looks at the project and looks at whether there's going to be any impacts to the environment and then mitigates those impacts. It's a document that provides knowledge to the citizens, but it doesn't approve a project or deny a project. So in this case, all you're doing is approving budgetary to move forward with this project. That budget will be used, as mentioned, preliminary design. Then when that preliminary design is far enough to where you have a project and you can do a notice of the project, then you can start the CEQA process. I would correct that until the initial study is done, we don't know whether this is going to be an EIR, a mitigated negative deck, or a category exempt. That can't be a call right now, even though the consultant might have some ideas. That decision won't be made until later on. And the third one is I've seen many times in my 33-year career, the last one was on a roundabout that about the same amount, $3 million was spent. And then the jurisdiction didn't go forward because it had some cultural resource issues through the CEQA process. But to do CEQA, you can't do CEQA until you get further along with the design and know what the actual project is, so people can comment on exactly what the project is and what the impacts are going to be.
Thank you, that's helpful. So what we're approving tonight, the project would go forward. It would go forward in a design component, not a construction component, correct? Mr. Schultz?
That is correct. Yes, the design, preliminary design work, there'll be check-ins with you. I mean, compared to the almond grove, and although that was just an overlay, but it was still a very complicated project that came to you on very many design issues before final improvement of that project.
All right, and so when we get to this juncture where environmental review of some sort occurs, then if more money is needed to take a different path or to move forward, that money will have to come from some source.
Yeah, that is correct. So this is Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. So at this point, we're planning on moving forward through, with your approval tonight, through design and environmental analysis. We'll come forward with a project along with check-ins with the council. We'll come forward with the best project that we possibly can and bring that forward for council review. You'll have the environmental information behind that, so you'll understand what the impacts of that design might be. And you'll be able to make a decision. The council will be able to make a decision at that time.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, I have just a very general question, since we're talking about design versus construction and what we're being asked to do tonight in our timeline. In looking at the staff report, so we're looking at a substantial grant funding from Measure B. So it's kind of a combination question. Number one, is that in jeopardy from the earlier discussion we had tonight about the plans for VTA to shift monies away from potentially local roads or other things for BART. Mr. Rennie is shaking his head, he knows, so thank you very much for that. But then so let's assume that the council approves the contract, takes the grant, asks for design specifications, and does the community engagement plan. Then we have to construct whatever it is and do whatever the environmental document is. And that's estimated at $25 million. So we have a $25 million funding gap. Do we have, any notion right now of when and where that money might come from? In other words, are the people on Ohlone Court don't have to be worried for the next 40 years because the town can't come up with $25 million? I mean, is there any notion of where we might get $25 million?
Not specifically. It is a very, very large sum of money to look for, but we are very hopeful as long as we design a good project, go through the process. There's several funding sources available, including the state's active transportation program, as well as the Measure B and other maybe smaller programs. This project has many benefits and we will have a great support. We're very hopeful in the process, we'll find a way to come up with a funding plan to fund this project. It is a long way to go, but we just need to continue the process.
Okay, but fundamentally, in order to be in a position to construct anything, we need to take the action to take advantage of the grant money that's available to us now, correct?
Yes, this is a very important step.
Okay. Okay, other questions the council might have? Seeing no questions, is there any discussion and or a motion? Mr. Rennie.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'd just like to start off by saying, I think encouraging bicycle and pedestrian use is important for improving the health of our communities. Getting more people biking and walking gets them healthier, and it also helps the rest of us be healthy by getting autos off the road and reducing emissions and so forth. An important way to get more people that aren't just avid bikers, to get sort of your average person that might not be as much of a biker out on the road, you need to create stress-free ways for them to bicycle to places. And if you think about the east-west connection in Los Gatos, there really is not very many stress-free ways to cross 17. When I think about Blossom Hill, I say, well, everybody's talked about how narrow it is. I still think it's a better option than trying to cross on Lark or cross on Route 9. You could do Main Street, but that's sort of your only options anywhere near that I can think of. So we really need to create a low stress east-west connection to encourage more people to start biking and walking, and obviously keeping all the kids safe that are already using it. But we can increase the health of our community by doing that. So I think this is important to move this project forward. We would like to create something that has no effect on the surrounding neighborhoods or severely reduces any effect that might be, but we can't get to that point without going ahead and funding the next part of this project, which is to look into the design and study the environmental effects. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to do the approvals, which is approve to execute a Measure B funding agreement with VTA and authorize the revenue and budget expenditure in item B of our recommendations, which I hope you don't want me to read all this out. And
no.
Then item C, which is authorize the release of the request for proposals for the Highway 17 bike and pedestrian overcrossing project. And D, with its authorize the town manager to negotiate and execute a consultant agreement with the highest ranked firm in amount not to exceed $3 million. And E, which is approve the Highway 17 bike and pedestrian overcrossing community engagement plan in attachment 3.
Thank you, Mr. Rennie. Is there a second for the motion? Councilwoman Sayoc.
Thank you. For the reasons already stated by Councilmember Rennie, I'll second the motion. And just really, again, thank staff for the engagement plan, because I know that was something that we had stressed in September. And I hear the concerns that the neighborhood in Ohlone Court have raised. But again, this is, there are many steps still that remain in this process, including the environmental clearance. And to get to that analysis, we have to take this step that we're doing tonight. So I second the motion.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the motion before I call the question? Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will be supporting the motion cautiously. I appreciate the input that we received from staff this evening, because it indicates, or it has shown, that we would be moving forward with the design, that we would use that money, $2-3 million, to get a design. There would be some type of environmental analysis at that point. So I am comfortable with that. I'm hopeful that should we get past a design and environmental clearance, that we can then come up with some money to go forward. But Ms. Smith seemed to think that we can. And for the people on Ohlone and other parts of the town who have concerns about this design, there are places along the process where you can still weigh in and where changes can still be made.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I'm also going to be supporting the motion, and I'm going to do it enthusiastically. This is an area where, if you do, I'm often walking there, not necessarily riding there, although I have ridden there. And I certainly have been there when Fisher lets out or when the kids are out. And it is dangerous for them to be riding and walking. And since we have initiated so successfully Safe Routes to School, since we have completed a bicycle and pedestrian master plan, which allows us to be eligible for grants, and since our staff, thank you, has been aggressive and creative in looking for grants that we may be able to use to implement some of these things. And this is one of the most actually sought after things that we've had in the town for a while. I remember when North 40 was coming up, are you going to build a path for us, over 17? It actually came up in that context. I hear the people on Ohlone Court, but I actually live in a drop-off pickup place for school. People come and park their cars in front of my house, wait there for their kids to get there and walk. It's fine with me. People bike and walk by my house all the time. It's also fine with me, as the gentleman said on College. I actually think the people on Ohlone Court, if they keep an open mind and participate in this process, will end up finding that this is an asset to their community, that they can come out and use that, just like the Creek Trail, access the valuable opportunities, transportation, recreation, things that we have available in Los Gatos. I think you might actually end up thinking that it's a good thing. And I hope you will. This will be a long process, and I know that you'll stay engaged. And this is just the beginning. So with that, I'm going to call the question. Councilman Rennie?
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes. It passes unanimously. Thank you for participating tonight, all of you who spoke and all of you who submitted comments. Our last item tonight has to do with the North 40. It's a discussion of a proposed settlement of a legal claim for damages that was brought by Summerhill. So I'm going to go to Mr. Schultz for the staff report.
Good evening again, Council. As you're aware, Summerhill, the developer of the North 40 Phase 1, requested a modification to their existing architectural and site application to remove the underground parking for the Market Hall. The request was considered by the Planning Commission on August 26th, September 9th, September 23rd, and September 28th, 2020. On September 28th, the Planning Commission denied that application for the removal of the underground parking. Summer appealed that decision, and on October 20th, the Town Council also denied the Summerhill's appeal of the Planning Commission's denial of that decision. On November 11th, Summerhill filed a claim against the town for damages arising from the town's denial. The claim alleges the denial of the modification violated the Housing Accountability Act, the Housing Element Laws, state and federal constitutional requirements, and the Federal Civil Rights Act. The claim alleges that as a proximate result of the denial of their modification, they will suffer damages in over $5 million. After the town received the claim seeking damages, the town attorney met in closed session with the town council on November 15th and November 24th to discuss the merits of the claim and potential settlement. Pursuant to the council's direction, the town attorney, with support from town staff, has reached a tentative agreement subject to town council approval tonight. The proposed settlement agreement is attached to the staff report and will resolve Summerhill's $5 million claim against the town. The key component of the settlement agreements are: the agreement upholds the recent Planning Commission and Town Council decision to deny the Summerhill's appeal and retain the underground parking and retain all other features of the project. In other words, there are no changes to the project that are being approved by the settlement agreement, and there's no money that the town will be paying to Summerhill for their claims. The agreement does modify 9 of 179 conditions of approval for the project. The 9 conditions of approval being modified are set forth as Exhibit A to the settlement agreement. The 9 conditions of approval modify or change the timing of when Summerhill can occupy the market rate units in relationship to the off-site improvements and the construction of Market Hall and the senior affordable housing units. For example, previously Summerhill could only occupy 187 market rate units before the BMP units had to be occupied. That number through the settlement agreement will now be 225 units that Summerhill can occupy before having to occupy the BMP units. In addition, Summerhill previously could not occupy any building until all off-site improvements were accepted by the town. The number through the settlement agreement is now 125 for the Lark and Los Gatos Boulevard intersection improvements and 187 for all other off-site improvements. These 9 changes only affect the timing of the occupancy and not the project. The town is withholding, with the changes through the settlement agreement, approximately $30 to $60 million in sales of market rate units until we are certain that the BMP units are finished and the public improvements are finished. We also have a public performance bond that we can use if at any time they fail to complete any of the off-site improvements that are on public property. And with that, I believe there's enough assurances. The town staff is in favor of and recommends approval of the agreement. And I'm here, and also staff is here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Are there questions for Mr. Schultz from council members? Seeing none, is there anyone participating with us this evening who would like to speak on this matter? If so, please raise your hand by using your Zoom controls. I do see one. Lifa, go.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members, and staff. I'd like to salute the staff, and particularly, I believe, the town attorney and some of the key people on the staff who represented the town in the negotiations on this project. The fact that you were able to, in a very timely fashion, modify the terms, giving approvals for occupancy based on the sequence of changes in the terms, with no other financial impact, no other negative impact to the town or to the developer. But it was economically advantageous to the developer, again, without cost to the town. Way to go. I salute you, and I hope the council will approve this agreement and we can move forward. And again, job well done. Thank you very much for representing the community the way you did in this negotiation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Figo. Are there any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, is there anyone else who wants to talk to us regarding this agenda item? Okay, I am not seeing any hands raised. So I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting and look to the council for any further questions they might have, discussion and or motion. Councilwoman Sayoc.
I'll go ahead straight to a motion. I move that we approve the proposed settlement between the town of Los Gatos and Summerhill Homes to resolve the damage claim filed by Summerhill as delineated by Town Attorney Schultz tonight and also contained in our staff report.
And Ms. Sack, are you including the specific settlement agreement that Mr. Schultz referred to?
Yes.
Part of our staff report? Okay.
Yes.
So a second? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and second it so we can get some discussion going. So before I call the question, because there was hesitancy on the second, I'm gonna look to the other council members for comments or questions that they might have. Seeing none, I'm gonna call the question. Councilman Rennie.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sayoc.
Yes.
And the mayor votes yes, so it passes unanimously. Thank you, council. For your work tonight. Thank you all who have participated and attended our meeting. We will see you again next for a special meeting on December 8th, at which time we will, unlike the rest of the country, certify our election results and have a graceful outgoing by those who are leaving the council, and welcome those new and congratulate those who are joining the council. So hopefully you can join us on December 8th for a peaceful and orderly transition of power. And with that, good night.